Chassidus. Seichel. What is meant by Seichel? And we said that Chassidus identifies three different categories in Seichel. Seichel Bahami, the Seichel of a Behema, which a human being can also actually work at that level. Seichel Anushi, it's called the human level of Seichel. And then there is a highest level, it's called Seichel Eliki. We haven't touched on the Seichel Eliki. We discussed Seichel Bahami, and we also discussed Seichel Anushi. And one of the points that we made in terms of what the Chassidus mean by Seichel is that Seichel actually defines the value. Seichel defines, identifies what is the true value of something. Whereas in the secular view, or a Seichel Bahami, as we discussed then very briefly, that to a behemoth there is no such thing as a table. There is a piece of wood that has four legs. A table as a concept doesn't exist. To a human being, a table is a real entity. And the four legs and the board are there only to support and to serve as a table. They're used as a means to make a table, but a table is a real thing. This was just a simple illustration. And a more significant, meaningful illustration was that a Seichel Anushi, to a human being, eating by feeding your mouth rather than putting your face into the plate, is not a logical thing. There is no particular reason. It's just that this is how a human being perceives the right thing to do, the right way to eat. Because he is a Bar Seichel. And as a Bar Seichel, he knows that he has to keep his head above. And anything that needs to come to the head has to be brought to it, rather than put his head into the food. Whereas a behemoth doesn't understand the whole thing. What's the difference how you eat? So these are very fundamental illustrations. What do we mean by Seichel? Again, we mean by Seichel that which the Seichel, the intelligence itself, identifies. A human being sees things in a certain way, not because of compelling logic, but because this is the way he sees things. So in aftermath of those discussions, which went over several sessions, maybe 4 sessions, someone came up with a question which I thought was a valid question, or an important question. And I delayed answering it because I wanted to answer it as a session, discuss the whole thing together with everyone. And the question that was presented was, does this mean that our perception defines what the truth is? For those who are not familiar with this type of terminology, with this type of thought process, this is an existent perception, existing philosophy in the outside world. It's a whole debate. What is truth? Is there such thing as an absolute truth? Or is truth defined by how you perceive things? And in the world in general, this serves to dismantle any real value. They say, oh, okay, to you this is truth because this is how you perceive it. I perceive it otherwise, and therefore to me that is truth. You can only readily see what happens to the whole concept of truth. That doesn't exist. And this is what we see in today's world, where any kind of personal preference may come from a perversion, may come from a sickness. But this is the way I like it, and therefore, who can tell me that I'm wrong? The reason I thought it was important to discuss it with everyone, although I don't know how many of you were exposed to this type of thought, but the importance of it is not the thought itself, but what's behind it and what the answer, the explanation to it entails. The whole basis for this type of a question, namely, is the truth defined by my perception? The basis for a question of this nature is that the truth is something which emanates and comes from the world. In contrast to what we know, what we believe, and what the Torah tells us, that the truth comes from the creator of the world, not from the world. Our first principle is that Breishis Boro Elikim as a Shomayim v'Haaretz. The very first thing is that Shomayim v'Haaretz are creation and were created by God Himself. This means that God Himself is the one who assigned the true value to what Shomayim v'Haaretz stands for. And further, it means something even much more profound. When the Torah tells us that Breishis Boro Elikim es Hashamayim v'Haaretz, that God created the heavens and the earth, this is not a historical record telling us where it's coming from. I'm sure you learn to see this and you know and this basic truth. This is not just telling us where it's come from some thousands of years ago. The major point in this simple statement is that Shomayim v'Haaretz represent a godly creation, which means that in this Shomayim v'Haaretz, as we observe it, and seem to us very simple and physical, in this there is a godly intent. There is godliness in it, which means that if we were to pursue the significance that is contained within Shomayim v'Haaretz, there is absolutely no end how far we can go. Because ultimately, it is God Himself who created it, which means that Shomayim v'Haaretz, that the true perception, the true reality of Shomayim v'Haaretz is what God intended for it. It's not even a physical entity. Let me illustrate and explain this point. Then come to the point I want to explain. We spoke in these lines also during those sessions, but now I'll elaborate a little bit. When you see somebody working, what do you see? You say, what is he doing? He's working. Then you ask, why is he working? Because he wants to get paid. Why does he want to get paid? Because he needs to pay bills. Why does he have bills? Because he needs to support his family. Why does he have a family? Because that's a very important thing to a human being. And basically, we can go deeper and deeper. We can stop at this. The real, so to speak, if we want to pursue it further and further, the object of any activity that a person does, such as supporting a family, is ultimately to serve Hashem. Which means that Hashem himself is involved in our activity. It's not just something that we define in our little world. Similarly, in the broad picture, the existence of the world and its ultimate purpose is not merely that the world should exist and people should live in peace with each other, but there is truly a godly intent in it. And this goes, as you learn Chassidus, to the highest and the highest levels. Coming back to our question. In the world, there are physical things. There are four kingdoms, basically. There's Doimei, Tzomeya, Chaya, Medaber. There's the inanimate, there's the plant, there is the Chai, there's the animal, and there is the Medaber, there is a human being. No one disputes the reality and undeniable presence of the inanimate. It's impossible to deny it. It's right there. It's the solid building block of the world. And this everybody accepts as solid. The plant is a little precarious. It depends on certain circumstances. It lives, and it has to, in order for it to survive, it has to have nourishment, it has to have sunlight, it has to have certain circumstances. And therefore it becomes a little bit precarious. That's less of a building of a solid block. You say we go into the animal kingdom. The animals are even more at risk all the time. They exist somewhere in the middle, in some kind of some kind of a balanced situation. They come to the human being from the worldly perspective. Say the human being, he's altogether an imaginary thing. He can't make sure what he is for, what he stands for. The animal knows what it's for. He's not confused what he has to do when he wakes up in the morning, or wakes up after a winter slumber. The tree knows what he has to do. The human being is the only one who is mamish confused. And therefore, if we go from that perspective, he is the least true entity in the world. What does the Torah say about this? How did God define it? Hashem created the whole world. All three worlds, all three categories. Doimen, Tzemeach, and Chai. After everything was complete, he said, now I'm going to create Adam. Why? Why was everything created before him? Because he says everything is created for Adam. He is the center of the whole creation. He is the purpose of the whole creation. So from Hashem's, from the Torah perspective, just the reverse is true. The only true creation in the world is Adam. Everything else is secondary, is only to serve Adam. This is why Hashem, when he created Adam, he says, I'm handing over the entire creation in your hands. It's yours. Use it for your purposes. You can use anything in the world, from the Doimen and Tzemeach and Chai, but don't dare touch a human being. He is mine. You can destroy anything for your purposes. But the human being, this is something else. This is representing my true presence in the world. Therefore, when we come to look at the world from this perspective, from a godly creation perspective, there, when we say that the human perception defines the truth, it's not even in line of the truth, because there is no truth besides the human perception. The real truth of the world is for the human being. This terminology, this whole view, is a false view even in the question approach, because this takes for granted that I said that the dominant, that the physical world is in existence. The question is, what is it there for? What is the truth? And from the Torah perspective, hey, the physical world is there only to serve the human being. Therefore, when we say that the human being has seichel, and this seichel for him defines right and wrong, good and bad, on the human level, this is not the ultimate truth, because the ultimate truth is not on the human level but on the godly level. But it is an intermediate step of truth, because at least it incorporates the true value in the world, which is the human being. It doesn't say that the rock, that's the truth. This is a total falsehood. At least it incorporates something from the perspective of the truth of what the world is for. The human being, as Hashem made him, has many levels. And in that respect, that's why there are many levels that he can perceive the truth. But the first thing is to recognize that The world is for the human being. And we do not have to look for the truth elsewhere. Where do we find the truth? We find the truth, of course, in the Torah. And in terms of our relating to it is how we are able to understand and bring out in our nefesh, in our souls, in our minds, the truth of the Torah. So, when we say that a human being, that Seichel Anushi, has to behave in a certain way, so everybody would argue he has to behave in a certain way. There's no mitzvah in the Torah. It doesn't say anything in the Torah about this. This is something which is your preference. And I explained that this is a prerequisite. A prerequisite means it's necessary. It's a necessary step in order to understand the higher level that the human being is supposed to reach. But if a human being gives up that level, and in terms of normal behavior in the world, he lives just like a cat, lahab. He can never relate to the truth of godliness, because then he is oriented towards a physical reality rather than a spiritual and a human reality. So therefore, when we say very simple things, such as human life has to be organized, a person has to live an organized life. He has to have a schedule. He has to have certain principles of how he dresses and how he behaves, how he eats, how he sleeps. On the human level, these are not mitzvahs in the Torah. But this, first and foremost, defines him as a human being. This is what is meant, as we mentioned the other day, derech eretz kodmo laTorah. What does derech eretz mean? The way of the world. Derech eretz. Behaving simply on the human level is kodmo laTorah, that precedes Torah. Is that the truth? The answer is absolutely yes. Is this the ultimate truth? No. But is this a real truth? A real requirement from the Torah, from the truth of God's creation? Absolutely. Because otherwise, we are abusing that godly creation called the human being, which is a true creation. The fact that we have a human neshama, a human soul, and we have certain perceptions or certain values is not an accident. Is not something that we did because of social pressure. This is a truth that was imbued in us along with our nefesh, with our neshama, with our creation and what we are. And the more we develop this, the more we live up to that, the more we are capable of living up to our ultimate goal and purpose and shlichus in the world, which is to understand the godliness in the world. So, in a nutshell, to answer the question as was presented, is our perception define the truth? What is the answer? Our perception is not defining the truth. It is the truth. There is no truth in the world without the human perception. The whole world was created for the human perception. That's what the world stands for. What did Adam Orishan do? The very first activity of Adam Orishan when he was created. The Medrash says that as soon as Adam Orishan opened his eyes and he saw the big world and he saw all the animals, the first thing he said, he gathered all the animals, the Medrash says, and he said, let us go and praise Hashem who created us. The animals didn't perceive that. Is that a union of the perception, Adam Orishan's perception? No, this was the whole purpose of the creation. This is the real meaning of creation. Just as this person that you observed working, if not for the purpose of supporting his family, would he be working? He would not be working. The whole work, it represents, as he's working, represents his concern and his need to support his family. It's a non-entity to him. It doesn't exist. What exists? His need to support his family. Superficially say, oh, he's working, but it really doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. It's not a real thing. We don't know of a person who works just for the sake of working. The Gemara says that in Mitzrayim, since we're coming out of Mitzrayim, it says one of the things in Mitzrayim, that the Mitzrayim, it says by Arvida Mitzrayim is Bnei Yisrael b'forach, that they caused them to labor, they forced them to labor, which is defined as porach. Porach. What is porach? The Gemara says porach. There are several definitions. The word porach means that which breaks you, which breaks your soul. And the Gemara says, what breaks your soul in work? When you work with no purpose. When you tell a worker to dig a ditch, and then the next morning you tell him, now throw the earth back in. And the next day dig it up again. And the next day throw the earth back in. This is porach. The same work, the same labor and heavier labor, with some kind of a purpose, is a human level of labor. So the labor is not defined by how heavy it is and how hard it is. It is by what human quality it has. If it has a human quality, then it's real labor. If it doesn't have human quality, then it's porach. Then it's torture. The world, likewise, if it has a human quality, at least at that level, then it's real. Then it's real. When it ceases to have a human quality, when we kind of attribute value to the world beyond and independent of the fact that it has to serve the human being, Hashem said in the Torah, the whole world is for the human being. This is what gives it value. Therefore, coming back to our Inyan, re-emphasizing this Inyan of Seichel and Mushi, that it is imperative for us to understand. It is imperative for us not only understand and know, but actually relate and bring out from our souls the human quality. Which means that we then see some true presence, true human presence in the world. Like we illustrated it in one of the sessions that we had, that when we have a day, the sun rises and the sun sets. To a human being, from one who uses his human seichel, he perceives immediately that this is not just, the sun is not just that it switched on the electric light. It switched on the light, it made light. It's a different period. The Rebbe has created an order. It's an orderly world. There is day and there is night. And there are seasons. There is summer and winter. There are weeks and months. All of these things are not accidental, are not just means of measuring time. These are true constructions and modules of what constitutes the whole world. In the calendar, you know that the Hebrew calendar is very different than the popular calendar. The popular calendar is very neat. Everything falls right into place. There is exactly 365 days in the year. Every month is exactly identical. Everything fits right in line. Everything fits very neatly in the scheme of human activity, of work, of how the world can run. And yet, the Jewish calendar says that there are sometimes 12 months in the year, sometimes there are 13 months in the year. And we have to adjust. Sometimes we have to the 13th month, because otherwise we'll come out Pesach will come out in the wrong time. Sometimes we have to adjust for which day is going to be, how many days will be Rosh Chodesh because of something else. So you would ask, if the calendar is to divide the span of time in a manner that is usable, why create a calendar that is so awkward? And what's the answer? We all know the answer. The whole world was created for the human being. And in this world there is a month. The month is not just a number of days. The month is his chachus. The world gets rejuvenated every month when the moon rejuvenates, is reborn. And since it was all created for us, that's our calendar. And we recognize that there is a rejuvenation when the moon rejuvenates. So it's not just for a purpose of convenience; it's for a purpose of being, of relating to the world the way the world was created, the way we are supposed to. The way we are supposed to regard the world. If we ignore these things, so then Hashem says, so why did I create a moon? I created a moon so that human beings will know when the world gets rejuvenated. they would know what's going on. So coming back to the point which you can review in the various talks that we had, absolutely true. The way we perceive, the way a human being perceives things, that's the first step close to the truth. The way the world is, devoid of the human input, it's a totally meaningless thing. Totally meaningless. That's not the way it was meant. It has no purpose. It's similar to a person working for no purpose whatsoever. So when we wake up in the morning, because it's morning, it's not just the hour, it's not just the duty that we have, or it's the light, the daylight doesn't let me sleep. It's a different time. It's the time for the whole world to wake up, and us along with it, and do our thing. That's what waking up in the morning means. This is why it says in Shulchan Aruch that when you get up in the morning, you should get up b'zrizus. Why? Because getting up in the morning means you're getting up to do Avodas Hashem. To do that which Hashem wants you to do. That's what a human being is. This is why the human being brings truth and value to the world. There's something that stuck in my mind from years ago, where I visited with the family, with the children and grandchildren. We visited Museum of Natural History. And in this Museum of Natural History, they show all kinds of different displays. A display of some kind of prehistoric animal, the ugliest thing that you can imagine, and how these animals are eating each other up. And almost invariably at every one of these displays there is a little write-up. This animal lived in such and such, and they ate each other up, but my they lived in peace. And they survived until the humans came. And they plowed out this whole land, and they occupied, and these animals vanished. Crying. Go to the next display. Something very similar. The uglier the creature, the greater are the tears that are being shed for it. The humans is the demise of the world. The world was beautiful. It was all of those vicious beasts each other up. It was a beautiful world. The human being came, destroyed it all. Do you see what kind of fallacy and stupidity one can come to coming from that direction? What is the whole world if not for the human being? Without the human being, the world is a world? Something to speak of? Any value? We have to reflect on it and understand who we are. We are modern human beings. We are Yidden in Kavle HaTorah, which we didn't get to talk about. But the point is, we are the whole creation is for us. The whole value of the world is because we are here. If not for that, there is any value to it. So the sun rises, and we are ready. We have the time to do Avodas Hashem, and we sleep. What happens then? Why is the sun rise for? That's why it says in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe says, "V'hinei Hashem nitzov olam." Hashem stands over every individual person and watches him, and he encourages him. He wants, do your thing. Why does Hashem stand over him? Because Hashem created him to sustain his world, to bring meaning to his world. Hashem looks at him and says, please, do your thing. So, please, let us do our thing. Okay? And don't worry about it. Yes, our perception defines the truth.